After a long talk with Dan about the Wendy situation, he just clapped me on the shoulder and apologized. His only response was, "What do you want to do, Jimmy?" At that point, I just didn't know. Wendy was sleeping off the whiskey, and personally, I really didn't relish comforting her. Yeah, I'm still pissed about it, but there's more important things going on here. Dan and I stayed up all night talking about what to do and where to go next, and about just how fucked this all is. We were definitely being targeted, and there was no fucking way any psycho motherfucker was gonna get the jump on me. Dan packed up his Dodge with all of his survival gear, food, clothes, and everything in his arsenal. We decided to leave during the cop's shift change, so Dan watched out the window until they had gone. The peculiar thing was, "James, check this out." Dan waved me over and pointed to the only squad car. There was one lone cop out there, but he wasn't sitting in the driver's seat. No. Instead, he was standing on the sidewalk, looking right in the window, right at me. He was bald and slightly overweight, and I knew it was him. Jesus Christ, where's Wendy? Without an answer, I ran for the guest room where she'd passed out, flung open the door, and she was gone. The bed wasn't even disturbed. I could hear Dan from the living room. "He's taking off, Jimmy. Let's go." "It's him. He's got her. He's got my wife," I blubbered. Without a moment's hesitation, we were in the truck, crashing through the garage door and down the driveway. Dan, driving of course, caught up to the cruiser and followed along behind a few cars. It was speeding and weaving in and out of traffic until it got off the freeway and started heading north, into the mountains. I've been racking my brain for another name, and only one comes to mind. A woman I was seeing just before all this happened. The dark man must know that I care for her. I don't want anything to happen to Angela, Martin, or Lucy. Why did I give him my youngest boy? Why? What was going through my mind to make such a thing? Fear. Terrible fear. I'm scared, yes. But am I such a coward? Yes, you are, Richie. This has to end. I asked him to end my life again, after he returned from murdering my brothers. Quiet and reserved, he didn't acknowledge me at all at first. He just tended to my dad. The sick fuck has been keeping him alive somehow. We've seen his face, so I'm sure we'll not be allowed to live. So why the games? I saw my captor stroking my father's hair, lovingly. Something told me he didn't enjoy part of this, like he had some form of regret for the victims I have chosen. Why is this happening to me? "How much longer are you going to do this?" I asked, completely defeated, to which his only reply was, "For each of your major sins, Richie. You are guilty of all of them. 6 down and 1 to go," he said, never taking his eyes off my dad. "So this is almost over, Galadoon?" I asked, enunciating the Galadoon part delicately. "You can call me Tim, and yes, I'm afraid the game can't go on forever. Although sometimes I would really like it if it did. 1 more to go. Any takers?" He asked me as he turned his head slow and smiled. I could see his cheeks lift through the ski mask. He must have been beaming, the son of a bitch. Wendy Welsh," I said, pleading. "Ah, the fuck buddy. You really have a way of picking them, don't you, Richie? Okie dokie, artichoke. So let it be written, so let it be done," Galadoon said, almost chipper. He spun around away from my dying father and fiddled with something at the table. Then he was back with my dad, with another syringe in his hand. "Wakey, wakey." And Tim stuck the needle into my dad's chest, thumbing the plunger. Dad shot up into a sitting position so fast that it startled Tim, somewhat. He jumped and knocked the bones off the bench near him, and it clattered to the floor, echoing loudly. Dad had his hands all over Tim. The light in his eyes was one of sheer terror. He was screaming and crying. I did this to him. Dad seemed belligerent in the way he groped and reached for our torturer, and Tim just held him, cradling him in a kindly way. My father's fingers dug into the camo jacket that Galadoon was wearing, and it brought tears to my dry, tortured eyes. I haven't blinked in days, but I mustered the tears. He was in so much pain. "Do something, please," I croaked. "I have. I woke him up to tell him why he's here." Tim pushed Dad off of him and looked into his eyes. He then told Dad everything, all about my sins, the things I have done to people, and more. I was to blame, he said, and my dad's eyes darkened and widened as Tim continued. Tim went on about something called the Dark Place, a world that exists outside of ours that houses all the armies of hell. He told Dad why he was called from there to punish his son, that this is a natural process and has been going on since the beginning of all things. Sin does not go unpunished, and the biggest transgressors are the ones that get his undivided attention, and that he is not the only one who does what he does.
We are many.
He then told my dad that he too was guilty of a great sin.
Being the creator of such a sinner is also a transgression that gets my attention. And you will have a choice, to let your son live or be allowing a murderer to go free. It is your duty to end his life. Remember, he chose to bring you here, in his heart. And if you do not take his life and send him to hell where he belongs, your soul will become forfeit. All forfeit souls are claimed by my master.
I never selected my father, you monster, I screamed, but my voice was so hoarse that I was barely audible.
You were going to. I know everything, Richie. Anyway, I'm sure you two have a lot of catching up to do, so I'll let you have at it.
And then he produced another syringe, smaller this time, and stuck it in Dad's arm. This should help with the pain. Then what Galadun did next simply blew me away. He handed my dad a handgun. Tim walked out. The familiar sound of the metal door sliding shut followed his egress. We drove on for over an hour, and finally the cruiser turned off the main road onto a dirt trail. The sun was just coming up, and the sky was a brilliant red color, just hanging on the horizon we were speeding toward. The road whipped and wound through patches of tall grass and evergreens, and after we crested a small hill, a large building could be seen off in the far distance, down the path a mile or so. Somehow the Word documents were connected to Pendle and Galadun. He didn't seem convinced of anything, just that whoever did this was a crazy person that needed to be stopped. Dude, this is fucking nuts. Should we call the cops? No police. You can't trust anyone, obviously. Just tail him until he stops. What about those FBI agents, Coyle and Jensen? I fumbled my wallet out of my pocket and found the card they gave me. I dialed, and 1 ring later an answer. Agent Coyle here. This is James Wells. A man dressed as a policeman has kidnapped my wife. We are following him to a large building in the woods. I glanced over at the GPS hanging from the windshield and found our coordinates for our location. Reading them off for Coyle, he assured me that he was on his way with backup. Before we hung up, he said, "Don't engage him, James. He could be very dangerous." I clicked the phone off. Fuck that shit. The complex was an abandoned factory of some sort. The top of the building was adorned with 4 large silos, one of which was still smoking. Someone was here. We were going to find them. I thought about my wife, wondering if she was safe or if she met the same fate as the others in the vicarious folder. The idea of some evil demon putting his hands on her could have made me totally crazy, but when shit starts flying, I tend to shut down and focus on the mission. Get my wife back. We parked outside a maintenance entrance on the side of the main building, and Dan killed the engine. There's a squad car, he pointed towards the 2 o'clock, at a long service ramp leading to a large dock door. Next to it, there was a small stairway, met an adjacent doorway, probably for personnel use. After a few minutes of packing our gear and loading our weapons, we made our way to the ramp. Dan took the lead and headed up the stairs. He was like that most of the time. Always wanted to be in charge, and brag about it. The door was painted a dingy gold color that was flaking off. Next to the wall was some writing, done with blue spray paint. It was a strange phrase, and for some reason it gave me an ominous feeling. The terrible scrawling, it said, "A dime toll, go in." "Got a dime, Dan?" I asked, trying to be funny. "Fuck that, even if I did I wouldn't give it to you." I reached in my pocket and no shit, 2 dimes exactly. There was an old can next to the entrance on the ground with a bunch of cigarette butts in it, so I dropped in the 2 dimes. Don't ask me why. Funny thing was, there were dimes already in the can before I put mine in. "I paid for you too, Dan. You can pay me back with interest." Just as I said that, there was a loud click. The dingy golden door opened by itself. Dan looked straight at me and said, "Well, you pay the toll." The place was completely run down and dilapidated. The tile floor was broken, and there was no light to be had. Both of us had our mag lights, so we flipped them on, revealing a long corridor with doors evenly spaced on each side, each one painted with that same shitty golden color as the personnel entrance. But these each had a small window as well. With Dan in the lead, we walked down the hall for what seemed like an eternity, until it T-boned. "Let's split up, cover more ground," I said, taking the left side. Dan nodded. "Stay sharp. Meet back here in 10. And he disappeared into the dark. It wasn't until I started looking through some of the dusty windows and the golden doors that I realized I might be in some serious shit. Shining my flashlight inside the portal, I could see a hospital bed with machines and a large table nearby. Pieces of metal of some sort were lying on the counter, and a workbench was set up near another bed. On the bench was a mass of something I couldn't make out, but I'll tell you it was red and shiny, the size of a melon maybe. I peered some more. On the bed was a person without a head. I didn't see it at first. The skin was crawling with bugs. I looked in the next window and saw a similar scene, only the person in the bed was upright, tied to the rails, and had no feet. The next door was also a murder scene. A woman splayed open with hooks over a bench where she'd been skinned midway, down the length of her body, leaving no skin on the front side. Her entrails sat in a pile directly underneath. Hallways full of doors, all like that. Things I've never seen before, even in my nightmares. Every room looked like it was the same. This place was a gigantic torture asylum.